Junior staff eats in the break room. Camille announced loudly enough for the entire reception area to hear. Her hand clamped around my wrist as I reached for a bacon-wrapped date from the silver tray. She yanked me back just as Blake Newman, the CEO whose 8-figure contract I'd spent 6 months securing, turned toward me with recognition dawning in his eyes. But she was just explaining her strategy for, Blake began. Company policy, Camille cut him off with practiced charm. I'm sure you understand the importance of hierarchy during these functions. Our executives will walk you through everything. I stood frozen as Camille's fingernails dug crescents into my skin. The crystal chandeliers threw diamonds of light across the meticulously arranged dining room, the room I had personally selected for tonight's celebration. The centerpieces I'd designed, the menu I'd curated specifically to Blake's preferences after weeks of research. The break room is that way, Camille whispered, her breath hot against my ear. There's leftover pizza in the fridge. Try not to make a mess. She released me with a subtle push. Every eye in the room followed my humiliation, some with pity, others with quiet satisfaction. My boss Dom stood at the head table, raising his glass in a toast, as if I didn't exist, as if my name wasn't on every slide of the presentation he was about to take credit for. The break room door closed behind me with a soft click. Through the small window, I watched them settle into their seats, and 23 executives about to feast on my success. My reflection stared back at me, hair carefully styled, dress purchased specifically for tonight, eyes hollow with disbelief. 6 years of working until midnight. 6 years of brilliant ideas whispered to Dom in private, only to hear him announce them in meetings as his own. 6 years of being the invisible architect behind every major account. I slid down against the wall, phone clutched in my palm. I'd promised myself I would never make this call, that I would earn my place on merit alone. My thumb hovered over the contact simply labeled G. Beyond the door, I heard Dom's voice rising. Revolutionary approach that came to me during my vacation in. I pressed the button. She answered on the second ring. Tess? It's been too long. Her voice carried the weight of old money and older power. I need that favor, I whispered. Tonight. 20 minutes later, I stood before the bathroom mirror, splashing cold water on my face. My hands trembled. What had I done? What would happen when the break room door swung open? There you are. Dom's voice boomed with false cheer. We've been looking everywhere for you. His smile didn't match the panic in his eyes. Something wrong? I asked, drying my hands slowly. There's been a development. You're needed at the table. Immediately. Before I could respond, he grabbed my elbow, steering me through the corridor with bruising urgency. Listen carefully, he hissed. Geneva Harrington just arrived, unannounced, claims she's the majority shareholder behind Newman Enterprises and wants to meet the brilliant mind behind the campaign. Blake seems terrified of her. Whatever you do, don't. We rounded the corner to the dining room, and he fell silent. She stood at the center of the room, commanding attention in a tailored burgundy suit that cost more than my yearly salary. Silver hair cut in a sharp bob that framed piercing eyes currently fixed on the entrance. On me. Tess, Geneva's voice cut through the hushed room. There you are. Every head turned. Camille's face drained of color. You know her? Dom whispered, fingers digging into my arm. Before I could answer, Geneva crossed the room, her heels clicking a death march against the hardwood floor. I was just telling everyone how disappointed I am, she said loud enough for all to hear, that my goddaughter wasn't seated at the main table. The silence in the room became a living thing. Goddaughter? Dom's voice cracked. Did I stutter? Geneva's smile was a weapon. Now, who decided that the architect of this entire partnership should eat pizza in a break room while others take credit for her work? If you're feeling the tension building in this room, imagine living it. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tried to erase your contributions? Like and subscribe to hear how this confrontation unfolds, because trust me, what happens next changed the trajectory of my entire career. My name is Tess Whitley. I'm 32 years old, and until that night, I'd built my career on being indispensable yet invisible. The reliable genius behind every successful campaign who somehow never appeared in the victory photos. I grew up with Geneva Harrington as a distant but watchful presence in my life. My mother had been her executive assistant before cancer took her when I was 11. Geneva had paid for my education but insisted I make my own way professionally. The world respects what is earned, not what is given, she always said. So I never used her name, never dropped hints about my connection to one of the wealthiest women in the country. I wanted to rise on merit alone. My first position at Landmark Promotions seemed perfect, a boutique agency with big dreams. Dom Petrova hired me as a junior strategist, impressed by my portfolio. For the first year, we worked well together. He recognized my ideas, gave appropriate credit. Then Landmark landed its first major client. During the pitch meeting, I watched Dom present my overnight work as his morning inspiration. The client loved it. Dom received a bonus. I received a mug that said, "Team player." The pattern continued. I'd develop innovative campaigns. Dom would tweak one minor detail and claim ownership. When I confronted him privately, his response cut deep. "Ideas need a face people trust. Yours isn't it. Be grateful I bring your concepts to life." I considered leaving, but every promising interview ended when potential employers called Landmark for references. Somehow, those opportunities evaporated. I later learned Dom told companies I was creative but unreliable, ensuring I remained under his thumb. Then came the Newman account. Blake Newman had built a tech empire from nothing and needed a complete brand overhaul before taking his company public. Every agency in the city wanted this contract. Dom assigned me to background research, nothing more. But I saw something in Newman's trajectory others missed. While the creative team developed sleek, modern concepts, I secretly built an alternative campaign centered on Newman's humble beginnings, the human story behind the technology. The night before the pitch, Dom rejected all the official concepts. In desperation, he discovered my hidden files. This might work," he muttered, scrolling through my presentation. "Why didn't you bring this to me earlier?" "I tried," I reminded him, 3 times. The next day, I watched from the back of the room as Dom presented my work with such conviction, you'd think he'd birthed every slide personally. Blake Newman leaned forward, captivated. When he signed the contract, triple the size of any previous Landmark client, he shook Dom's hand and said, "You really understood me, not just my company." The celebration dinner was planned for 6 months later, after the successful launch of Newman's rebranded empire. I had assumed my invitation was assured. I had managed every detail of the campaign implementation, often working until dawn. Blake knew my name from countless emails and calls, yet here I stood in the dining room, watching Camille's face transition from shock to calculation as Geneva's words hung in the air. "There must be some misunderstanding," Camille recovered quickly. "We rotate staff at these functions. Next time." "Rotate?" Geneva cut her off. "Like furniture? How fascinating." Her gaze swept the room before landing on Blake Newman. "Blake, did you know that the campaign concept you praised Dom for was actually created by Tess? That the personal touches you appreciated so much came from her understanding of your journey, not his?" Blake's expression darkened. "Is that true?" Dom stepped forward. "We all contributed. In a team environment, show him," Geneva said to me. "Show him your original notes." My phone felt heavy in my hand. I have them here. From 6 months ago. With timestamps. The room grew impossibly quiet as I pulled up the files and handed my phone to Blake. As he scrolled, his jaw tightened. "These are dated weeks before our first meeting," he said finally. "And they're identical to what was presented, down to the tagline." Dom laughed nervously. "Tess is an essential team member. That's why we value her so much. Perhaps there's been a—" "Stop talking." Blake's voice cut like glass. He turned to Geneva. "I presume this dinner was meant to discuss our next steps?" She nodded once. "Then I'd like to have that conversation with the person who actually understood my vision, not someone who stole it." His eyes found mine. "Tess, would you join me at the table?" Dom's hand gripped my shoulder. "As her superior, you should probably start updating your resume," Geneva suggested pleasantly. "Because after tonight, I suspect your services won't be required at Landmark, or anywhere my influence reaches." The blood drained from Dom's face. Camille stepped forward, survival instinct kicking in. "This is highly inappropriate. I'm the event coordinator, and I'm still waiting to understand why my goddaughter was directed to eat cold pizza while watching through a window as others celebrated her achievement," Geneva interrupted. "Perhaps you can explain that to me." In the break room, Camille's mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. A server appeared, pulling out the chair at the head of the table, for me. As I moved to take my seat, Dom blocked my path. "You planned this," he hissed. "You've just ruined years of relationships." "No," I whispered back. "You did that yourself, one stolen idea at a time." The entire room watched as I sat down beside Blake Newman and Geneva. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. 6 years of invisibility crystallized into this moment of terrifying visibility. Blake leaned toward me. I want to hear the whole campaign again, from the actual source. I took a deep breath and began to speak. Across the room, through the break room window, I could see Dom and Camille watching. For the first time, they were the ones looking in from the outside. But this was just the beginning. What happened after dinner would transform not just my career, but the entire power structure of Landmark Promotions. And Dom hadn't even begun to understand what my phone call had set in motion. The dinner progressed like a perfectly choreographed dance of power shifts. With every question Blake asked, with every answer I provided, Dom's face grew paler across the room. Through the break room window, I watched him frantically texting, his thumb jabbing at his phone like he could stab his way out of this nightmare. The insight about connecting your childhood innovation lab to the company's founding story, that was brilliant, Blake said, cutting into his steak. It made the technology feel human. That came from reading about how you built your first prototype in your grandmother's garage, I replied. Most tech companies hide their messy beginnings. Yours needed to be celebrated. Geneva sipped her wine, watching me with quiet approval. Tell them about the logo redesign. For the next hour, I walked through every element of the campaign. The senior vice presidents who had ignored me for months now leaned forward, hanging on my words. The creative directors who had rejected my ideas repeatedly now nodded along as if they'd supported me all along. When dessert arrived, Blake set down his spoon and turned to face me directly. I have a confession, he said. I almost pulled the contract 3 weeks ago. A collective intake of breath circled the table. The implementation wasn't matching what had been promised. The emails I received from Dom lacked the understanding I'd experienced in our initial meetings. Blake glanced toward the break room. Then someone named Tess started copying herself on all communications, providing additional context, sending midnight clarifications. Suddenly, everything aligned again. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. I made a call to my private investigator, asked him to find out who was really driving this partnership. My throat went dry. He discovered something interesting. Blake turned the card over. On the back, in handwritten notes, Tess Whitley, real architect. Senior team takes credit. Pattern established. You knew? I whispered. For weeks, Blake smiled. I was planning to request you personally manage our account moving forward. I just didn't realize I'd be making that request during such theatrical circumstances. Geneva laughed. Theatrical is my specialty. The company president, Alan Ward, who had remained strategically silent throughout dinner, finally cleared his throat. Miss Whitley, perhaps we should discuss your position at Landmark first thing tomorrow morning. Why wait? Geneva countered. I find that important business decisions are best made while the situation remains fresh. Alan loosened his collar. Of course, Tess, effective immediately. You'll be promoted to Executive Creative Director, Geneva suggested, with the Newman account under her exclusive management. Alan nodded too quickly. Exactly what I was thinking. And compensation adjustment retroactive to the beginning of the Newman project, Blake added, to reflect her actual contributions. I sat stunned as they negotiated my future across dessert plates. 6 years of invisibility transformed in a single evening. When dinner concluded, Blake shook my hand firmly. I look forward to working directly with you from now on. He lowered his voice. And I admire your restraint. In your position, I might have done something far less civilized than making a phone call. If only he knew what I had planned. Geneva walked me to her waiting car, her driver holding the door. You should have called me sooner, she said. I wanted to succeed on my own terms. And how did that work out for you? Her eyebrow arched. Sometimes power needs to recognize power, Tess. False humility serves no one. I glanced back at the restaurant. Through the window, I could see Dom and Camille still sitting in the break room, their faces locked in silent argument. What happens to them now? I asked. Geneva's smile turned sharp. That depends entirely on you. The next morning, I arrived at Landmark to discover my belongings had been moved overnight. Not to a cubicle with a window as I'd hoped for years, but to Dom's corner office. His name had already been removed from the door. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues who had witnessed my humiliation the night before, now falling over themselves to congratulate me. The same people who had watched in silence for years as my ideas were stolen suddenly claimed they'd always known I was the real talent. I set my bag down on the massive desk and traced my fingers over the polished surface. Dom's family photo was gone, but the ghost of his presence remained. The office door opened without a knock. Camille stood there, clutching a tablet to her chest like armor. Alan wants to see you in the conference room, she said, her voice stripped of its usual authority. Everyone's waiting. Everyone? The entire creative team. And Dom. I followed her through the hallway, aware of eyes tracking my movement through glass partitions. Whispers trailed in my wake. The conference room door felt heavier than usual as I pushed it open. 14 faces turned toward me. At the head of the table sat Alan. To his right, Dom, his expression carved from stone. Tess. Alan gestured to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table. Or, should I say, Executive Creative Director Whitley. I took my seat, feeling the weight of expectation press against my shoulders. As you all know, last night revealed some organizational challenges. Alan chose his words carefully. In light of recent developments, we're implementing immediate changes to our leadership structure. Dom's knuckles whitened against the table edge. Tess will be taking over creative direction for the Newman account and all major client relationships moving forward. Alan continued. Dom will be transitioning to a new role as, this is absurd, Dom cut in. One dinner with her godmother, and suddenly she's qualified to lead? She's been here 6 years without a single promotion. Ask yourselves why. Silence stretched across the table. Because you blocked everyone, I said quietly. Because you took credit for my work while telling other companies I was unreliable when they tried to hire me. Dom's laugh held no humor. Paranoid as always. Maybe you weren't promoted because your ideas only work when refined by someone with actual experience. Is that why you presented my original Newman pitch without changes? I pulled out my phone. I recorded our meeting the night before the Newman presentation, when you found my backup concept and claimed it as your own. The blood drained from Dom's face. You what? After 3 years of watching you steal my work, I started documenting everything. I set my phone on the table. Every presentation you claimed as yours. Every email where you copied my language verbatim. Every meeting where you dismissed my ideas only to present them later as your own. Alan's expression hardened. Dom, is this true? She's manipulating the situation. Dom's voice rose. She makes minor contributions and expects full credit. Ask anyone on the team. All eyes turned to the creative team members, who suddenly found the table surface fascinating. Layla, I said gently to the youngest designer, who actually created the Newman logo that won the industry award last month? Layla glanced nervously at Dom before answering. I gave my concept to you, and you passed it to Dom for review. And what happened after that? She swallowed hard. Dom presented it as his design evolution of your original concept. Dom slammed his hand on the table. This is a coordinated attack. Yesterday, I'm the creative leader of this agency. Today, I'm being ambushed because her godmother happens to be Geneva Harrington? No, I corrected him. You're facing consequences because Blake Newman hired a private investigator who uncovered your pattern of theft weeks ago. Geneva just accelerated the timeline. The room fell silent. Dom's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and finally, calculation. Fine. He straightened his jacket. If that's how we're playing this, Alan, I quit, effective immediately. And I'm taking the Westbrook account with me. They're loyal to me personally. Alan's expression didn't change. Actually, they're not. Excuse me? Blake Newman called Westbrook CEO this morning. Apparently, they play golf together. He shared some concerns about credit attribution at Landmark. Dom's confidence faltered. Westbrook has been my client for 4 years, and they've requested Tess take over their account immediately. Alan finished, along with 3 other clients who received similar calls. It seems Mr. Newman has been quite busy. The room spun around me. This wasn't part of my plan. I had expected to confront Dom myself, on my terms, not to have others fighting battles I had prepared for years to wage. Dom turned to me, hatred burning in his eyes. Congratulations. You've destroyed a decade of relationships in one night. Those relationships were built on my work, I replied evenly. The only thing I destroyed was the illusion that it was yours. He stood abruptly. You think this is over? That you can humiliate me and walk away? I built this place while you were fetching coffee. No, Dom. I built this place while you were taking credit. His smile turned cruel. We'll see how well you do without someone to polish your rough ideas. You may have the title now, but you lack what it takes to lead. Always have. He stormed out, leaving a vacuum of tension behind him. Alan cleared his throat. Well, that was. Let's take a short break before discussing transition plans. As the room emptied, Camille lingered behind, hovering near my chair. I want to apologize for last night, she said, her voice oddly soft. The seating arrangement wasn't my idea, Dom insisted. He said you'd understand it was just business. I studied her face, searching for sincerity and finding calculation instead. 6 years, Camille. You watched it happen for 6 years. She had the grace to look away. We all did what we needed to survive here. And now you're doing what you need to survive under new leadership. Her smile tightened. We're professionals. Adjusting to new circumstances is what we do. As she walked away, my phone buzzed with a text from Geneva. Phase 1 complete. Ready for Phase 2? I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the reply button. The rush of this morning's victory was already fading, leaving a hollow space where my anger had lived for years. Dom was gone, but the system that enabled him remained, filled with people who had watched my talent being stripped from me daily and said nothing. A promotion and corner office wouldn't erase those years. The real revenge I had planned went much deeper than professional humiliation. I typed back, tonight, 8 p.m., bring the documents. Because Dom had made one critical mistake in his years of theft, one that went far beyond stolen ideas and borrowed acclaim, one that would not only end his career but potentially send him to prison. And everyone who had enabled him was about to learn exactly what happened when you pushed the quiet one too far. Geneva's car idled outside my apartment building at exactly 8 p.m. I slid into the back seat beside her, my laptop bag heavy on my knees. Congratulations on your promotion, she said, handing me a glass of something amber from the built-in bar, though I suspect it feels hollow. It does. I took a sip, the liquid burning my throat. Everyone at the office is suddenly my best friend. People who never remembered my name are sending me lunch invitations. Geneva's laugh lacked warmth. Success attracts parasites. Speaking of which, have you heard from Dom? He cleaned out his office this afternoon, left his company phone and laptop. I stared out the window as the city blurred past. But he's been calling board members, telling them I manipulated the situation. And how is that working out for him? Mixed results. 3 directors believe him. 2 are waiting to see what happens next. Geneva nodded thoughtfully. And what is happening next, Tess? I opened my laptop. That depends on what you brought me. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a flash drive. Everything you requested. Bank statements, private emails, transaction records. My investigators are thorough. I plugged it into my laptop, scanning the files that appeared. My breath caught. It's worse than I thought. Much worse, Geneva confirmed. Dom wasn't just stealing your ideas. He was stealing from the company itself. The evidence laid bare on my screen told a damning story. For years, Dom had been running a scheme where he created phantom vendor accounts for Landmark's projects. He'd submit inflated invoices from these fake companies for consulting services that were never performed, then approve the payments himself as creative director. The money flowed directly to accounts he controlled. Most disturbing were the emails showing he'd specifically targeted projects I'd developed, using my concepts not just for professional advancement but for financial fraud. How much? I asked quietly. Nearly $2 million over 5 years, Geneva replied, carefully spread across dozens of accounts. He was clever about it. Not clever enough, I murmured, scrolling through the evidence. Does the board know? Not yet. I thought you should decide how this information comes to light. I closed my laptop. I need to think about this carefully. Don't wait too long, Geneva cautioned. My source says Dom has a meeting tomorrow with Landmark's biggest competitor. He's planning to bring client information with him. The car pulled up to a restaurant I didn't recognize. A discreet establishment with no sign, just a single blue door on a quiet street. I thought we could discuss strategy over dinner, Geneva explained as the driver opened our door. Someone is expecting us. Inside, the restaurant was nearly empty, with only a few tables occupied by people who looked important enough not to acknowledge others. In the back corner, a solitary figure waited. Blake? I said in surprise as we approached. Blake Newman stood, shaking my hand. Tess, glad you could make it. You two know each other beyond business? I asked, looking between him and Geneva. Old friends, Geneva explained as we sat. We serve on several boards together, including one that might interest you, Blake added. The Investor Alliance for Ethical Business. Blake added. I felt a strange sense of manipulation settling over me. Is that why you hired a private investigator to look into Dom, because Geneva asked you to? Quite the opposite, Blake said. I hired the investigator because something felt off about how Landmark operated. When my investigator mentioned your name repeatedly as the uncredited source of the work I admired, I called Geneva to ask if she knew you. Imagine my surprise, Geneva said dryly, discovering my goddaughter was the same Tess my friend couldn't stop talking about. So last night wasn't just about my promotion, I realized. You were gathering evidence. The promotion was deserved, Blake said firmly. But yes, we needed to create a situation where Dom would reveal himself. And he performed beautifully, Geneva added. His outburst this morning, his threats, his attempts to contact clients, all documented by people we trust. I felt anger building in my chest. So, I was bait? All of this was orchestrated without my knowledge? No, Tess, Geneva countered. You were the catalyst. The phone call was your choice. What followed was opportunity. What exactly are you proposing? I asked, suddenly wary. Blake leaned forward. Landmark's board meets tomorrow at noon. Dom has requested time to present his side of the story. Claims of harassment. Professional sabotage. That's absurd. It's predictable, Geneva corrected. Powerful people rarely accept accountability. They rewrite narratives where they're the victims. So what do I do? That, Geneva said, sliding a folder across the table, is entirely your decision, but we've prepared some options. Inside the folder was a detailed plan. Times, talking points, legal precedents, and a list of people who would support my version of events. The final page contained something unexpected, an offer letter. What is this? I asked, reading the company name. Visionary Partners. My new venture? Blake explained. A creative incubator for ethical innovation. The position is yours if you want it. Triple your current salary, full creative control, and proper credit for all your work. I stared at them both. You're offering me a way out. We're offering you choices, Geneva corrected. Stay at Landmark as their rising star. Leave for a guaranteed position with Blake. Or burn it all down, she said simply. Show the board what Dom has been doing with company funds while stealing your ideas. The evidence on that drive is enough for criminal charges. The restaurant seemed to fade around me as I considered my options. The easy path beckoned. Take Blake's offer. Walk away from Landmark. Start fresh. But something in me resisted. If I expose Dom, I said slowly, what happens to Landmark? Their reputation takes a hit, Blake admitted. But firms survive scandals every day. And the people who watched it happen? Who benefited from my work being stolen? Geneva's expression softened slightly. This isn't just about justice for you anymore, is it? It never was, I realized. It's about a system that rewards theft and punishes those who create. The next morning, I arrived at Landmark's offices an hour before the board meeting. The weekend cleaning crew had left Dom's former office spotless, erasing the last physical traces of his presence. I set up my laptop and waited. Board members began filtering in around 11:30. Alan nodded nervously as he passed my open door. At 11:45, I gathered my materials and walked to the conference room. The tension was palpable as I entered. 8 board members sat in silent judgment, with Alan at the head of the table. Dom had arrived early and sat midway down, his expression confident. Beside him sat Camille and 2 senior directors who had benefited most from his stolen ideas. Tess, Alan gestured to an empty chair. We were just about to begin. Actually, I said, remaining standing, I'd like to address the board first, if that's acceptable. Dom smirked. Eager to defend yourself? I ignored him, focusing on the board members. Before Dom presents his version of events, I believe you should review some information that came into my possession. I distributed folders to each board member. These documents show a pattern of financial fraud committed over the past 5 years. Phantom vendors, fake invoices, money diverted to personal accounts. Dom's face drained of color. This is absurd. She's fabricating. The evidence has been verified by independent forensic accountants. I continued calmly. Bank records, email trails, your signature on every fraudulent approval. One board member looked up sharply. Is this accurate? We're talking about significant amounts. Almost $2 million, I confirmed. Dom stood, his chair scraping against the floor. This is a coordinated attack. First, she ambushes me with her godmother. Now these false accusations. The police have already been notified. I cut in. They're waiting downstairs with the company's outside counsel. The room erupted into chaos. Dom lunged toward me, but Alan stepped between us. Enough, Alan shouted. Dom, sit down. You can't possibly believe this. Dom appealed to the board. I built this company's creative reputation. With her work, a quiet voice said from the doorway. Every head turned to see Layla standing there, clutching a thumb drive. I have copies, she said, her voice trembling but determined, of original files, timestamps showing when Tess created concepts and when Dom modified them to present as his own, going back 4 years. Another designer appeared behind her, then another. Soon, 6 members of the creative team stood in solidarity. Dom's confident facade crumbled completely. "This is a witch hunt. You're all ungrateful. The only thing we're guilty of," Layla interrupted, "is staying silent too long." 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. Alan nodded toward Dom. "Please escort Mr. Petrova to the lobby. Company counsel is waiting." As Dom was led away, shouting threats and accusations, I finally took my seat. "The financial fraud is only part of this," I told the remaining board members. "For years, Landmark has operated under a system that rewards idea theft and punishes innovation. It's not just Dom, it's cultural." I laid out my vision for restructuring the creative department: transparent attribution, collaborative workflows, proper credit for all team members. By the time I finished, the board was listening with genuine interest. "You've given us a lot to consider," the chairwoman said finally, "and saved the company from potentially devastating fraud charges. What do you want in return?" "I'm not staying," I said simply. Alan's head snapped up. "But your promotion—" "I've accepted a position elsewhere," I explained. "But before I go, I want to ensure the people who actually create the work this company profits from are properly recognized and compensated." I pushed a document across the table, a restructuring plan that promoted Layla and others who had been overlooked for years. "This isn't negotiable. It's the price of my discretion about how long this fraud continued while the board remained oblivious." 3 hours later, I walked out of Landmark for the last time. The creative team gathered in the lobby, uncertain but hopeful about their futures under new leadership. Layla hugged me tightly. "I can't believe you're leaving after fighting so hard." "Some places can't be fixed from within," I told her, "but I'll be watching to make sure they keep their promises to all of you." Outside, Geneva's car waited at the curb. "It's done?" she asked as I slid into the back seat. "Not exactly as planned," I admitted, "but better." "How so?" "Dom's facing charges. The board is restructuring the creative department based on my recommendations. And instead of taking Blake's offer," I smiled, "I'm starting my own agency, with Landmark's blessing, and 3 of their former clients as my first accounts." Geneva's eyebrow raised. "That wasn't one of the options we discussed." "I'm tired of other people determining my options." I watched the Landmark building recede in the rear window. The best revenge isn't just exposing theft or punishing the guilty. It's creating something new that wouldn't exist without you. 6 months later, my new agency occupied a modest office downtown. Our staff numbered only 12, but our reputation for transparent creative attribution attracted both clients and talent. On my wall hung a framed news article about Dom's indictment and Landmark's subsequent creative renaissance under Layla's leadership. Blake Newman remained our biggest client. Geneva, to my surprise, became a silent partner. And every employee contract included what we called the Whitley Clause, guaranteeing proper credit for all creative work, regardless of title or tenure. The true revenge wasn't the public humiliation of that dinner, or even Dom's criminal charges. It was creating a place where talent couldn't be stolen, where ideas belonged to their creators, and where the quiet ones never had to make desperate phone calls to be seen. If you've ever had your work stolen or been pushed aside while others took credit for your contributions, remember this: your revenge doesn't have to be destruction. Sometimes, the most powerful response is to build something better, something that wouldn't exist without you. Leave a comment sharing your story, and subscribe to hear more about navigating workplace injustice with integrity. The best comeback isn't just surviving, it's thriving on your own terms.